I think it's time to talk about the board and all of the components on the board, kind of getting you familiarized, like we promised earlier, with everything on there.
We want to take a chance to kind of just point out where everything is on the board so you can see where it's at and get a kind of feel for it.
All right.
First off, we have the Qualcomm Snapdragon 410 processor. This is the shining star of the Dragonboard because it's the brain of the board, right?
I like what you did there. Yeah.
No, I got really excited because I've used other boards in the past, and there's so many problems with having lots of lag and glitching and like trying to move the mouse around and it kind of like jumps around awkwardly. But we don't have any kinds of those problems with using this board, and so it's been really exciting.
Honestly, you have to see it for yourself.
Yeah. But there is 1 GB of RAM on board, and there's also a little slot to be able to put in a micro SD card, and so there's a lot of options with that.
I'd actually like to talk about that real quick. We have experience with other boards like the SD card slot can't be used for anything. You're either running your operating system off it, you're running boot disks off of it, or you're running a boot file off of it or an image. With this board, you can not only boot an operating system or flash an operating system onto the board, you can also use the micro SD card as extra storage space. At least a few of the boards that I've had experience with, you can't do that. So that's a really cool feature about the micro SD card slot.
Yeah, and also one of the most exciting things for me was that if you look, you can see that there is wireless internet, GPS, and Bluetooth all built into the board. And I have never seen another one that had all 3 of them are already pre-installed and that comes with it. So that it's been really exciting. Again, the micro SD slot, and there's different dip switches, so you can control how to boot from the card or not, and so that you can use that to be able to install different operating systems onto the board. There are 2 USB ports. We haven't found a much need to have more than that because, again, no extra dongles to plug in Wi-Fi, no extra dongles to plug in Bluetooth. Don't have to deal with that. Just get a mouse and a keyboard. There are also keyboards available that have a little like touchpad included, so it hasn't been a problem at all. Now there is a micro USB port. This is to connect to a computer. It does not work at the same time as the mouse and the keyboard, but then you don't need the mouse and the keyboard if you're connected to a computer. So again, no problem there.
Yeah, another cool thing about that is, I mean, you have basically a PC host to manipulate aspects of the board. So
connect through a terminal.
Connect through a terminal, do all sorts of cool things through there. In fact, that's how you're going to be importing your applications from Android Studio onto the board. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's important to note that if you're more Android, you probably use the micro USB, and if you're more Ubuntu, you'd use the USB slots.
Yeah. Yeah, so as you can see up there, number 7, also the 40-pin expansion header, which is the low-speed expansion header. That's where you're going to find all of the GPIO interfaces, especially the ones that we're going to be using for this course. And we're going to talk to you way more in detail about all that later on.
Yeah, I take it back. This is one of the most exciting things on the board.
Yeah.
Well, so many things.
For this course, this is going to be one of the things we're going to be using the most, at least for course 3, but yeah, definitely. We have a 16-pin analog expansion header, which is located right next to the 40-pin expansion header. On this header, you have access to audio, you have access to microphone jacks, so essentially you're able to solder in a 3.5, for example, 3.5 millimeter audio jack and plug in some speakers, or solder on a jack for a microphone. There's lots of other interesting things on there. We won't go too much into detail in this course, but just so you know, it is there, and there's plenty of documentation on this header. We have the 60-pin high-speed header, which is going to be used for a lot of other things that we won't be covering in this course, possibly in later courses. But just so you know, it's there, and there again is a lot of documentation on this header. You have the power button right there. You can actually, yeah, you can see the power symbol there. Pretty straightforward, but yeah, you're going to be using that mostly for Android, powering off your board on Android. You most likely won't be touching it when you're running Ubuntu.
Yeah, there's shutdown menu on Ubuntu.
When you picture your cell phone, you have your your sleep/power button. You have your volume buttons, which are located right next to the power button, and that's mainly what that's going to be for on Android. The minus button is used later on for booting into fast boot, but you'll be taught how to do that later. The DC barrel jack, basically how you power your board. Pretty self-explanatory. You're going to need to stick between a 6.5 volt and a 18 volt DC power supply or power adapter, and 2 amps. So you can find all of that information in the spec sheets for the board, but you definitely want to make sure you look at that so that you don't burn out your board by plugging in too high of a voltage.
Yeah.
So stick between 6.5 and
the nice thing
18.
here, though, is it has a lot higher voltage than most boards customly have. Because if I took an 18 volt adapter and plugged it into something else, like it'd probably burn it out.
Oh yeah, no, we've actually done that.
So yeah, but
Yeah.
this one's a bit safer. So.
Yeah, and it definitely being able to put higher voltages in there.
Plus, it's nice because then you get a high voltage power rail out of the 40-pin expansion header, which can be very useful if you're running certain things.
Oh yeah, we're gonna actually talk about that. So sometimes you might need to run a really high voltage to power a certain device. This board's already got that, so no need for batteries or extra adapters.
For example, powering a motor.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and then last but not least, the HDMI port. It's how you're going to see everything, right? So full size HDMI to HDMI, really cool. So yeah, there's your board, at least some of the main components. I'd recommend looking at it and kind of getting familiar with it.